has recently set the very ambitious goal of reaching climate neutrality by 2050. And we are fully committed to reaching this goal, leaving no one behind. Our economy used to be fully, almost completely dependent on energy from our national fossil fuel, which is oil shale. In the green transition, we have managed to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions already by 70% since 1990. And we have taken important steps, of course, to switch our energy transition towards solar, wind, and we plan to stop producing electricity from oil shale by 2035, and to stop using oil shale as a basis for energy production completely by 2040. This kind of transition, of course, cannot be made by governments alone. We need the industry, we need the people. And hence, private sector also holds a key role in climate action. It is important for national and also sub-national governments to partner up with the private sector in their common effort of implementing the climate action. I will now give the floor to Kaisa Jungman, who is the Director of Sustainable Business Development at Metso Outotec, and she will provide you with an industry perspective on the path to climate neutrality. Thank you.
Evening, everyone. I must warn you that I have flu and my voice has been really bad for a couple of days, and so I'm sipping my tea at the same time, and I hope that my voice will carry for the next 7 minutes or so. So I come from a company called Metso Outotec. So our customer industries are providing aggregates, minerals, and metals for everyday living. As we all know, metals and minerals and rocks are used everywhere in a modern society. We are building more and more roads and infrastructure and having electrification going on where we need more metals and minerals. And so these are very essential industries that we need to have in the transition to carbon neutrality. And our role as a technology provider is to provide technologies and services to these customer industries so that our customers can be more energy efficient, reduce their emissions, water usage, and improve circularity, meaning recycling, recovering different kind of materials. And one example being, for example, recycling construction and demolition waste. Next slide, please. Thank you. And we are committed to 1.5 degrees journey, which means that we have set science-based targets, but it all really begins from the R&D. Our target is that all our R&D projects need to have a sustainability target. So even though we have already today very good technologies in place, which I'll tell you more about in the coming slides, in the Planet Positive, but already, I mean, in addition to those technologies that we have today, we need to do more. And that, of course, happens in the basis of the R&D, that you need to make sure that every time you produce a new product, it's better than the previous models, and you innovate new things to support your customers. But in the science-based targets, which are the green ones in this slide, we start from the suppliers. So we're pushing our suppliers to set science-based targets. And that's of course an ambitious goal to, support your biggest suppliers all over the world and set science-based targets as a basis of them reducing their emissions. And then in the production, our current science-based target is to reduce 50% by 2030, but already now we see that we can actually do that more quicker, and we will update that year pretty soon, and we have already set net zero target for our own production by 2030. Logistics is one area. We are also reducing emissions, and that's also going to be a challenge if the business is growing and you will have more transportation. So obviously what you need to do there is to really optimize the transportation routes, think about where you have your warehouses and plan the whole transportation in the most efficient way, but also what kind of transportation partners you partner with, you use with in your own transportation. And then the product use phase target, that's a limited scope of products that we included in this target. So maybe the Planet Positive portfolio will tell a bigger story how we, in addition to the science-based target, also support the customers. And then we have been offsetting our flight emissions and doing different kind of actions on office side. So it's important to have climate targets in all parts of your operations so that it touches every employee and everybody can feel that they are doing their share. We can move to the next slide, please. One moment, T moment. We talk about footprint and handprint. So footprint demonstrates, as you might know, the emissions that are generated when you produce the goods and services. So it contains the emissions coming from your production, logistics, suppliers, etc. And then the handprint demonstrates the emissions avoided. So what kind of emissions, what amount of emissions you can avoid for your customers on an annual basis. And this is now a sample of 17 technologies that we have done these kind of calculations where we compare different kind of technologies to the competitive alternative in the market. And we make an estimation on the emissions that the customer can save when they are choosing the better alternative. And of course, our target is to grow the handprint all the time by selling more of these good technologies, innovating new technologies, and of course, learning to do these kind of calculations to more and more technologies, which will support our sales and help our customers to understand what kind of choices they need to make to choose the better alternative. And if you want to know more about this kind of handprint calculations we have a good glance on that one in our previous annual report. Then next slides, please. Yeah, the Planet Positive, we have identified from our whole portfolio about 100 plus products and services that we consider to bring a significant reduction for our customers in terms of energy, emissions, water, circularity, or safety. And each of these products has gone through an assessment where we have set threshold levels for each of these themes. So they need to fulfill a certain level of, for example, energy reduction to become Planet Positive. And of course, all of these need to have a baseline in place. So when we state that some equipment is Planet Positive, we need to be clear with our customers that where do we compare it to, and we need to be able to demonstrate the benefit in numeric values, which means that we have done testing or auditing or done conference papers or any kind of studies on the actual benefit that we're claiming these Planet Positive solutions have. And with the current portfolio, of course, our aim is to sell more of these technologies, but as said in the beginning, the R&D is really in the core of the portfolio, so developing all the time better solutions to tackle the climate change. And when I was mentioning the threshold levels, so for example, in the carbon emissions, we have looked into our customer emission targets and then reflected back into our products that what kind of reductions we need to do for our customers so that we are supporting them in their journey towards the net zero. So this is a concept that you will, if you want to follow our company, will hear more in the coming months. We will talk about it a lot more in the future, and we consider it really a competitive advantage that we really want to bring it in the core of the business and differentiate ourselves from our competitors as well, because of course we all want to do this what is good for the environment, but at the same time it needs to make business sense so that it carries in the future as well. But I think I've used my voice, so thank you very much. This was really brief presentation on the topic, but I'm glad to answer if there's any questions or if I still have some voice left.
Hi, I guess, Kaisa, thank you very much for the keynote. There are currently no questions at the moment, and we'd like to also here take it further with a panel discussion. Now, welcome you all who is on site and also online. We have quite a few viewers online as well. So if the viewers online have any questions regarding or for the panelists, then please drop it in the chat box where I also posted just now the location for it. Today we'll be having 3 panelists. 2 of them are here with me and 1 will be joining online. And at first, before we bump into the panel discussion, I'll let each of the panelists to say a couple of words about what is it that they do and who they are. And we are starting with Janne, and I'll do a small intro here as well. Janne is the Chief Climate Policy Advisor at Confederation of Finnish Industries. His background lies in electricity future pricing and more around energy markets. There's absolutely no doubt that Finland has set a very ambitious target for carbon neutrality already by 2035. They've created sector-specific roadmaps that would aid in leading the businesses to step up in contributing to achieving the goal. A fascinating approach from which there's a lot to learn from all the other countries as well. I'll give the floor to Janne.
Thank you very much. And as we heard in the introduction from Kaisa, the Finnish industry is very committed to achieving ambitious climate targets, and Metso Outotec is of course a great example of a company that really has built a competitive advantage based on resource and materials efficiency. And this same applies to Finnish industry at large. We come from a country with a tradition of engineering, very skilled engineering, and we have a competitive advantage in a high impact engineering, but we are short of natural resources. So our history and tradition has revolved around making scarcity a benefit for our businesses. And this is of course one reason and rationale for our industry to go greener in a fast pace. But now if I can have my slides visible, I'll showcase something about the Finnish climate roadmaps. So basically, as Erkki said in the very beginning, Finland has a very ambitious climate target. We aim to become carbon neutral by already 2035. This requires significant investments and significant progress in all sectors of the economy for us to achieve such an ambitious target, also in such a fast pace. And when the government set up the climate target, the Finnish industries stepped forward to support the government in achieving the vast targets. So we see the pattern of perfection here. The government sets the direction and the level of ambition, and then the public and private sectors work together in finding ways to actually achieve those targets. So basically, as the slide says, Finland is very committed to carbon neutrality, and Finnish industries is committed to support the nation in achieving this. But our mechanism of doing that has been actually to build sector-by-sector roadmaps that then can be integrated as a whole package. So basically we have built 14 different sector roadmaps, and each of the sectors then explain how they aim to cut emissions as fast as possible, and also what they need from the environment around them to support the development. So basically, it is a business-driven and a bottom-up approach, where basically each of the sectors represent or present what they can bring to the table to achieve the joint common targets. And here I think we move to the video. This one, yes. So we've created a short animation to showcase.
This is Finland.
Yes, there we go.
Our climate is northern, but our heart is global. We know that the whole world is at a crossroads for global climate action. Finland took 2 great steps to be ahead. First, we have set the high ambition to be carbon neutral by 2035. Second, to support this, we completed the world's first integrated climate roadmaps for all sectors of business and society working together. What came out is one single whole with many insights. At the centre, a decarbonised energy sector makes all of this possible. Process industries do many things, including carbon neutral electrification. The latest in digital ICT serves the carbon neutrality goal in services and commerce. New materials, design and recycling all reduce climate impact in fashion and buildings. Finally, innovative food, logistics and waste solutions will provide more than food for thought. We offer to the world not only a vision, but actual practical solutions for global decarbonisation.
Yes, as you can see, we packaged it all into a very short video, and despite the fluffy and beautiful colors, it's backed by a very comprehensive analysis and comprehensive data on how the sectors can actually make it there. You can find the roadmaps on the website climate2035.fi, but basically the key component is working together or the collaboration and work together between the public and the private sectors. I'm closing with the statement that basically climate change is first and foremost a vast investment challenge. We need to make massive investments in all the sectors of the economy to achieve the sufficient emission reduction targets. And this is where no public money whatsoever will be sufficient to finance all these investments, and that's why we need the private money and private investments to join forces with the public one. And this is what we're trying to achieve in Finland, and I'm quite convinced that despite it's a challenge, we will be achieving our climate target of carbon neutrality by 2035. Thank you.
That is definitely a very ambitious goal. I think there should be like a separate conference around that topic even. But we'll get to the questions and answers round as well. What I mentioned before, people on site, you can still raise your hand, do the old-fashioned style questions and answers round. And other people who just joined us in the online, then please do drop your questions in the question box on the online platform. But without further ado, I'm moving onward for the next presenter. I must say there's a lot of ambition in this room, because the next presenter comes from Sweden, which has also set a very ambitious climate neutrality target. So we are joined online by Dr. Götze Mette, who is the head of secretariat at the leadership group for the industry transition, hosted by the Stockholm Environmental Institute. She holds a PhD from University of Dundee, Center of Energy, Petroleum and Mineral Law and Policy. The so-called leadership group for the industry transition, called Lead It, is grounded in the conviction that partnership between public and private sector is key to achieving the industrial transition. And in 2019, the leadership group was launched by Sweden and India at the UN Climate Action Summit, putting the starts for enabling the transition of heavy industry towards net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And I can see Götze has joined us online. Hello.
Hi, I'm very pleased to join you all, although online for the time being. So I'd like to, I don't have slides, so I'm going to just carry you through what Lead It is, what we have, I'll provide some examples of what we have achieved so far, and where we're going. And it really aligns with today's discussions. It was great to hear about the roadmaps. I look forward to the discussions later. I already have questions for my fellow panelists. But roadmaps is an area that is a method that is very much grounded in Lead It's work, so I'll mention that as well. But let me start by saying that, as stated in the beginning, Lead It is led by India, governments of India and Sweden. It is a state-level initiative, but it brings together public and private sector. So we bring together 16 countries from around the world, including South Korea, Argentina, many European countries, Finland including, Sweden of course, and Ethiopia. So we cover quite a large group of countries from emerging economies and developing countries. And we have 19 companies in the group from heavy industries. And I abstain from saying hard to abate industries because, as you know, nowadays we call them easier to innovate industries because we know that industry transition can be achieved. And the group is collectively committed to achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement. And they really, as mentioned before, they are subscribed to the notion that the industry can and must progress on low carbon pathways while pursuing efforts to reach net zero carbon emissions by mid-century. So we aim as a group to accelerate action that is aligned with credible commitments. Indeed, our theory of change is completely based on the notion that industry transition stands a greater chance of success if the public and private sectors work in partnership. That is partly in finance, but also in implementing such roadmaps that was mentioned before. And how do we do that? What the group does is they share knowledge among each other on how industry transition can be achieved. And they demonstrate that it's possible to have a just transition in the industry sectors that does not compromise competitiveness. One example from Sweden is the hybrid project. It had a lot of airtime at COP26, but that's one example of demonstrating that the business case for industry transition in the steel sector. And then we also encourage others to embark on industry transition. So the group has a very active outreach. So this year we have been joined by 6 new members. The United States is an example, Ethiopia, Heidelberg Cement, Salzgitter Steel, and a few others. And we support also governments and industries in their transformation. Now, we do that in 3 impact pathways. One is called the partnership, well, what we call is the partnership of change. So we do offer a forum for policy dialogue, and it's a platform for countries and companies and finance institutions to share know-how and engage on technology development. And I must state that Leadership Group for Industry Transition is formally supported by the World Economic Forum. And hence we also engage with Mission Possible Partnership in our work. And we also work in partnership with other organizations sharing our ambition for accelerating global industry transition. One example is that we've launched, we supported this year, we worked very closely with Clean Energy Ministerial and UNIDO to support the Industry Deep Decarbonization Initiative, which focuses on creating demand for green materials, low carbon materials and products. And we've done that through co-production of a report, which is a guide on green public procurement. So it's a step-by-step guide for setting green public procurement program and implementation on procuring steel and cement. We also launched working groups. So we worked in smaller groups on concrete and cement, on green hydrogen, on demand-side policies and financing. And we also collectively work on establishing financing principles on industry transition. And now these sessions helped, of course, facilitate knowledge exchange among the group, but also provided concrete recommendations for the Lead It Summit, which we will be announcing on Tuesday at COP26. So I'll be traveling tomorrow. And we have evidence for action track, and under this track we carry out analysis and we develop tools. So an example is that we just did an analysis of nationally determined contributions and read how many of them refer to specific sectors, and we've seen that not many. It's more than last year's analysis. We've done one last year. It was 25% of the countries actually referred to specific sectors like steel, aluminium, cement, and this year's 36%, but it's still very few. Then we have industry transition roadmaps track. Here we support national governments and private sectors to develop their own net zero emissions roadmaps for industrial transition. I'd like to share with you that just this week we've launched an interactive guide. I'll drop a link so that everyone can see it. It's a guide that is developed and designed by our team to assist countries and companies to lead and develop their own roadmaps. It's an interactive tool, a step-by-step guide, which we have built around a methodology that also learned a lot from Sweden's experience with national road mapping that is carried out by Fossil-Free Sweden. Like Finland, that also covered several sectors, 22 sectors to be precise. So by using this tool over this and next year, we are focusing on India. We have started discussions on industrial transition roadmaps there. We have workshops, and we are aiming to support sectoral road mapping process in India together with our local partner, Terry. So I'll stop here and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Richa. Again, glad to have you with us. And we'll go to the last panelist, last but not least, Alar Saluste. And Alar is the project manager at Ragn-Sells on the project called OSA. He'll be telling about that a bit as well. And this project's goal is to bring in innovation for carbon-heavy industries, residual resources, and develop new novel resources out of it. His background lies in environmental technology and environmental engineering. And today he is introducing the circular economy aspects and thus piloting an innovation with great opportunities to scale and impact. Looking forward. Alar.
Thank you, Erkki. So I guess it is my turn to talk about a little bit more on hands-on approach. So what exactly can be done to reduce the climate impact? And first I would like to start from how do we today see extraction of materials? So this is kind of the basis for a linear economy, is that we dig up a certain material that has a variety of content, and usually the material that we are going after has a very small concentration, meaning that majority of the material will be left as waste. So in Ragn-Sells, we believe that through circular economy, we can reduce the impact on climate. So in order to kind of successfully implement circular economy, you need to view the materials in a bit different way. So as Ragn-Sells, main activity is around waste. We are looking materials or also waste as a kind of a mix, and we want to extract the materials based on or using kind of a logical way. So I will explain what is logical. So in many cases, for example, for hazardous waste, the reason why waste is hazardous is often also a great opportunity. So the part that makes the waste hazardous kind of sticks out or reacts first. And in order to do anything with that material, you have to first remove the part that makes it hazardous. I think during this week in COP, I have heard many times that we need to dream big, but we need to start small. So in Ragn-Sells' case, one of our innovations that takes place in Estonia, we are focusing focusing on oil shale ash. And oil shale ash as a proportion of reactive calcium. If you take the ash in your hand, it will start to react with your hand. And this is a logical way, so the first step, how to approach this material. So what we want to do is we want to produce precipitated calcium carbonate, taking the calcium from the ash and also taking CO2 from the air, for example, putting them together, and you have calcium carbonate. A valuable material for producing windows or flooring or paper or paint and so on. By doing so, there is two important things. The process of using waste in a circular economic way produces calcium carbonate that will be CO2 negative, meaning that if you use this in a further processing in a next product, it will reduce the footprint of that product. Today we have two great companies, Gialan from Germany and Tarkett from France, who have joined the project. They are end users of this nice white powder. But the second important thing is that once we have removed calcium from oil shale ash, it opens up opportunity to extract next materials. For example, magnesium, silica, aluminium, and etc. Magnesium, for example, is in great need right now in the world. And we believe that, as I explained before, by doing a systematic approach to the waste materials especially, we can start implementing the circular economy concept. And this PCC is just a start. So that's it. Thanks.
Okay, super. And I didn't introduce myself. So I'm Erkki, and I'm mainly dealing with clean tech innovations, supporting super early clean tech startups, commercializing research, and doing it internationally, but also mainly in Estonia. So my kind of level is on the innovation level. But today here we have, I think, a great set of panelists. So we're kind of covering the national scale on private partnership, public-private partnership, on the industrial scale, and then on a technological level with a very specific technology that I have understood has very huge impact. But before we go to that question, I'd like to ask Janne, so if Finland has kind of agreed on the target, you have a roadmap of in 14 sectors, as I understand.
Yep.
So will you also share the secret sauce with the other countries? Or what is the secret sauce?
Well, that's what we're trying to develop. I think kind of the approach Finland has taken is grounded in science. The climate change panel in Finland did the assessment that what's the sufficient climate target for Finland that's rooted on science, and that basically leads us to pursue carbon neutrality by 2035. And acknowledging that it's actually only 15 years away, it's a significant task for our economy to decarbonize. But we take that as a challenge. We know that all the other countries in the world are pretty much facing the same situation later on after us. So once we find the solutions to decarbonize the different sectors in our economy, we can then provide other economies and other countries the same solutions. So that's kind of the rationale. It's of course it's what must be done as the kind of ethical or moral ethical standard, that we need to carry our responsibility of the climate, and that's the first standpoint. But then if we manage to do that and develop new innovations and new approaches at the same time, then we can share those with others, helping others to also decarbonize, but also to bring or create new business for our economy as well. So basically, of course, we need to decarbonize our electricity and energy system, and then electrify other sectors of the economy to the extent that's commercially viable and practical. And then for other uses, we must better utilize our bioresources to replace fossil-based raw materials. And then there are other industries, these hard to abate or important to innovate, as Götze said, that where we really need innovation breakthroughs to finalize the carbon neutrality.
But it's still for the businesses to uptake their targets as well, right? So it's not kind of pressured upon them, but they do have to agree. They have to have the mindset or the alignment of.
Yep.
So how do they take it? And that's, I would also broaden that question to Gökçe as well. So from the industry side, because we know that reaching carbon neutrality isn't all about public sphere. It's, obviously, it's the key point, as Gökçe also mentioned, is the public-private partnership. So how do you convince the industries that are established for economic reasons, not in the beginning or initially as for environmental reasons?
Yeah. But I think for industries, and especially for those industries who are operating in the global market, the long-term sustainable business requires sustainability as in its core. So basically, the assessment that the Finnish industries and companies have made is that climate change is a topic that must be addressed, but if we manage to provide solutions for others to also cut their emissions, that's how we create new business. So basically, climate change is a huge investment opportunity, and by moving in the vanguard, we are seeking to take a larger share than practically would fall on us otherwise. Mm-hmm. So it's a business opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Gökçe, would you have a comment on that as well?
Yes, absolutely. And when we speak to many of our members, and it was the same in the first presentation, of course, companies are on board, non-state actors are on board because they want to be better, but they need to have a business case. And in here, I think one important thing there are two things. One is, of course, many of our members agree that to remain competitive in the long run, they need to change their business models today. And that's in Europe mainly because we have a carbon price, but this is also becoming more widespread around the world. There are other countries outside Europe that are implementing a carbon pricing. So that's one. And then the second one is around value chains. So roadmaps, and especially this sort of economy-wide sectoral roadmaps, are really important because all sectors need to actually travel in the same direction because value chains are incorporated. So in Sweden, we have the example of hybrid. You can produce green steel, but if there's no one to buy it, that doesn't make business case. So we need incentives across the value chain so that the transport companies, the renewable energy producers, today here, even bike producers, white goods appliances, they want to use green steel, green aluminium, because they also need to reach their climate targets because each sector have sectoral transformation ambition that are agreed under the roadmaps in Sweden. So we need to create those value chain cooperations. So that's why Hybrid was able to sell its first green steel that is the first in the world to Volvo cars, which also has a net zero target. So we need to sort of see that market happening. But private sector can't do it alone as well, because we need standards, we need the policy to align as well. We need to be able to define what green products mean and how do we calculate their embedded carbon, so that we have a transparency and we can also sort of account for what we are selling at a price premium in most cases. And then, of course, the other thing is global cooperation. I want to just add that we should also somehow think about, yes, we are in Europe and also across in the US, there are several initiatives like the First Movers Coalition today, but we shouldn't forget that these industry products are often globally traded, so we need sort of international policy alignment so that we avoid carbon leakage problem.
I'd like to bring in or follow up on this with the innovation topic, partly because it's my background and also partly because it's also about Alar's. From the Ragn-Sells point of view, if there's an innovation sprouting on the market, it's either very research heavy or so, it requires quite a lot of capital to even be tested, researched, developed into a scale where it can be commercial, be sold on the market and then scaled to create a larger impact. So are there any obstacles at the moment that are keeping or holding back the new innovations, new business models, especially in circular economy aspects, that are kind of restricting the scalability and the urgency or the fast tracking of the innovation into the market?
Yeah, absolutely. Because in circular economy, we are dealing with waste. So basically CO2 and ash are both waste streams, meaning that handling them is, in the eyes of the law, it's quite difficult. So today, the whole legislation is built on linear economy. And for circular economy, we definitely gonna need a new type of legislation. And also, for example, for the CO2, it's still today not sure which kind of a source for our project, for example, is okay. It looks like that legislators are pushing for no green CO2, basically. So that is also one challenge to understand. And of course, the speed. I think for any investor, speed is important. And if permitting and also scaling up technology testing, that takes too long, that is always a kind of a risk. And I think we need to innovate in this area, how to bring the technologies to the market faster. Today, from an idea to a process plant, it can take up to 10 years. It should be 3 years. And then we can also reach the kind of climate goals that we have set for ourselves.
Gökçe, do you see that there will be an opportunity for the industries together with public-private partnership? Could they provide this kind of platform for fast tracking novel business model? It doesn't have to be an innovation, but rather like a more efficient technology that enables carbon neutrality in the long run.
Yes, I think for that, I'm going to drop another sort of motto today. One was that it's easier to innovate industries, but the other one that we speak of is partnership is the new leadership. It is possible through partnership also across several industries. So technology, yes, we need to accelerate it, but it also still links with the market, right, with the demand. And because when we need to sequence things, so a lot of the heavy industries need a lot of renewable energy, and in often case for industries like steel, we need a lot of green hydrogen. So partnerships can help accelerate the innovation process by making products, by creating products and markets for these products. So if there's already a sort of a technology agreement or a value chain agreement between a hydrogen producer and a steel maker, and then that can also help accelerate innovation. But then regulation could be a factor that could actually slow down the process, because we know that permitting timescales are quite long. We have also quite strict state aid regulations in the EU, as an example. So these also have to be addressed. One way of tackling the sort of regulatory bottlenecks is the sandbox approach. And that is quite commonly adopted or used in the UK. So it may be useful for regulators to try in different approaches and have time period for sort of testing accelerated permitting procedures for specific technologies. So we can do that by adopting an agile regulatory framework. Another kind of example is this carbon contracts for difference scheme that some EU member states are now trying. So indeed, again, here we need partnership among the private sector to accelerate innovation, and also cooperation with the public authorities, regulatory bodies, to find ways to avoid regulatory bottlenecks and long permitting processes.
Both the panelists wish to say a few words.
If I may pick up first, I think one of the kind of key insights from also the Finnish exercise of doing roadmaps in collaboration between the public and the private sector is that at the same time when the private sector actors can kind of take their stand, and this is how far we can get, they can also describe what's the type of the operative environment that what's required. And that's where in many of those roadmaps, the requirements are pretty similar to what Katja said and what Alar brought up earlier, that we need to have an operating environment that encourages investment and innovation. We need to have an operating environment that it does give the signal that this is the direction we are headed. We are heading towards carbon neutrality, and we are going to use policies to guide us there. But at the same time, the government and the operating environment needs to be encouraging in the sense that there are no bottlenecks to delay the investments and the innovation process. Because with climate change, we don't have the time for delays. So that's why also the kind of regulatory environment needs to pick up the game to enable us to shorten the time from 10 years to 3 years to getting kind of investments into use. So that's kind of, I would also call on the communication between public and private sector, and I see that the Finnish roadmaps also have been kind of supportive in this dialogue.
Yeah, I would like to add that this collaboration also across industry is important, because in my presentation I showed the kind of the philosophy of how we extract materials, and if you look at oil shale ash, the precipitated calcium carbonate is the first product, but one company does not have enough capability to develop 6. There's potential for at least 3 to 4 to 6 different materials to be extracted, but we cannot afford to kind of develop all the technologies at once. So we need to take a sequence. So the first one, second one, third one. But with collaboration, you could kind of accelerate that. So the opportunity arises from producing one mineral, then the door opens up for the next one and the next one and so on. And that would otherwise maybe magnesium will be on the market in 25 years from this ash. But together, by working together, this could be in 5 years.
Or even less.
Or even less.
I'm going to remind the audience as well, if you have any questions, then yes, there's a question. Can we have a microphone here for the slide here?
Hi, good evening. In the case of Finland, would you mind elaborating on the kind of financing that the government provides? Is it in the forms of bonds or grants, or would you mind elaborating, please?
Yeah, that's a great question. Of course, kind of what you need to have is first a vision, then you need to have a plan, and then you need to actually execute on the plan, and that brings us to finance as well. In terms of Finland, I think the key financing mechanisms are actually targeted to the R&D phase. So we are financing, and the government is providing support for R&D funding and piloting projects. But then once those stages have been passed, then it goes into the markets to find the financing. But at the same time, of course, in the EU environment, there's the current the European Union's Green Deal, and then the kind of recovery packages, which are directing financing also to the green investments and innovations. So that's, of course, one of the important channels to actually scale up the investments faster and in larger scale. But I would say that currently the financing environment for new green and clean innovations, it's much improved over the past, say, 5 to 10 years. But yes, it still remains a bottleneck for many of the actors in the value chains to actually finance the first large-scale plant. It's easy to find financing for the very early stage research and innovation, but then when it comes to the actual commercial pilot, that's when I wouldn't call it death valley, but it's the key bottleneck, and that's where probably more kind of risk-tolerant private capital would be required.
There's another question from the audience.
Yeah, from the very practical example of the calcium carbonate here, if you then think about the whole project as such, what do you think is the positive carbon impact or the negative carbon that we can store? Do you have any sum there?
Thank you for the question. I think in this case, if you look at ash stored in Estonia, it's roughly 600 million tons. So captured and saved carbon is roughly 400,000 tons of CO2. So, 400 million tons. It's an evening session. So.
Can you put a kind of a perspective on that? Grasp it.
I guess that is more than the emissions of Sweden.
Yeah, that's 8 times Finnish emissions.
8 times Finnish emissions.
Yeah. So that's kind of ambitious.
Per year.
We're talking.
Yeah, per year. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this COP is all about implementation and actionability. So Gökçe, I'd like to invite you back on the screen. Let's talk about what we have seen during this past week at COP26. And does that kind of raise your alarm bells more, or does that provide you more comfort in knowing that there's, the wheels are turning in the correct direction for the implementation towards, carbon neutrality?
From at least what I've seen from Sweden, observing the announcements, we can be positive that the market really not. This COP is, I think, quite particular in terms of creating a momentum across non-state actors. We have seen that John Kerry announced the First Movers Coalition across several sectors, and quite a few of them are from heavy industries. So the First Movers Coalition is one that will bring together, that is bringing together frontrunners or first movers, let's say, companies that are willing to commit to procuring green across their entire value chain and their supply chain. So we see that a lot of more companies are coming on board to commit to cooperating across several sectors. We have also seen the Glasgow breakthroughs announcement, and one of them is also on steel. So that also shows the public sector support and creating momentum on industry transition once again. What needs to follow is coordination on finance, because this is COP, and we need to think globally. Industry transition is a challenge that we hear in Sweden, and especially financing is still a challenge in Europe, in Sweden, in Finland. It's a much bigger challenge in the emerging economies and developing countries, where a lot of these products will actually, the demand for these products are going to grow. In Asia and Southeast Asia, we know that there'll be much more demand than in Europe or US on steel and cement as they continue to industrialize. So we need to see a lot more on financing industry transition in heavy industries, a lot more on donor coordination. So these are the missing pieces that I haven't followed yet. But we know that a couple of private banks are also coming together under climate-aligned finance principles, facilitated by the World Economic Forum and Rocky Mountain Institute. So next week will be one to keep an eye on, because 9th of November for everyone is the Industry Transition Day. We don't actually have an official Industry Transition Day at COP, but the climate champions have announced it sort of informally as the Industry Transition Day. So there'll be several more initiatives being soft launched or launched at COP. One is Mission Innovation on industry, and then we're going to also hear a lot more from the Industry Deep Decarbonization Initiative, which is an initiative that is bringing together countries to commit to a certain percentage of green public procurement. This is going to be very important for creating business case also for industry transition. And of course, we will have our summit on Tuesday, followed by a summit statement.
Okay. Janne, from your side.
Yeah, I think this is a question where the glass is either half full or half empty. What we've seen in the beginning of this week, we've seen more statements taking us towards lesser global heating than ever before. But at the same time, yet it is to be faced that that's not going to get us towards all the way to the Paris Agreement targets, even if implemented fully. So in that regard, we've taken steps forward, but yet more steps need to be taken forward and more faster than we've done so far. But I've been especially happy to see the global methane pledge. That's a very important initiative. And then the UK-driven breakthroughs, and especially those that Götze also mentioned on steel and some of the heavy industries, those are very important, and those are crucial for us to actually solve in order to achieve carbon neutrality. And then the potentially probably a bit less seen initiative that was launched in the beginning of this week was the deforestation pledge. That's of course very important as we head towards 2050. We need to also more invest and actually implement on achieving carbon sinks. Those are becoming more and more important, and we need to start to work with those already today.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you have any insights from so far?
I would kind of conclude COP so far. I think the most important there is coming together and understanding the problem and acknowledging the problem, and then we can start to taking steps towards it. But I think the things you brought out, this methane and then deforestation, these are really good first small steps, but we need to keep going. So this is not enough by far. So we need to pick up pace. But for that, I guess this is so complex challenge, this climate challenge. Everyone needs to work together. It's not possible just for one country or just a group of countries to do it. Everyone has to be committed and keep moving.
Absolutely, I agree. I will give you now the last minute, but I'd like to maybe think in the future. Janne, you can think, 15 years from now, or to the next year as well. During the next COP, what is it that you have achieved? What is that you can then showcase?
Within the next 12 months, I hope that, of course, the Finnish emissions are stagnating or decreasing. But at the same time, I think we've been able to bring a bit more clarity and crispness on the operating environment, how we are actually moving forward within Finland and also hopefully globally as well. In Finland, of course, there has been heated discussions on whether we are on or off track to achieving the 2035 carbon neutrality. By this time next year, I think we're much more confident on whether we are on the path or not, or whether we need to implement more and more measures to achieve that. But on the global scale, I hope from today to next year, we've been able to see much more investment going into green technologies, especially on clean energy sources. That are, of course, forming the basis for electrification and cleaning other sectors as well, pretty much as Götze also brought up.
I can absolutely second on that. Alar, in a year?
In 1 year, definitely, as we are a private company, so we need to kind of keep the pace, and hopefully in 1 year we'll have at least one working factory for this kind of similar innovation in Sweden, and for what comes to this OSA project, hopefully I can show then not only powder but already products made out of this powder, maybe piece of window or a flooring. So
we'll keep that in mind. And Gökçe as well. You got about a minute.
Thank you. we will be continuing to support countries in road mapping process. So one thing I forgot to mention, very important about COP26, is that we also heard India make a net zero announcement, which is quite welcome. So we'll be hopefully, we have embarked on a journey to support India in their road mapping process for cement, and this will be followed by the steel sector. And we have an ambition by next COP to have supported 4 countries in their road mapping process. In the meantime, we are encouraging and working with our member countries and others to update their roadmaps, because technologies change fast and financing environment change fast. So not only new roadmaps are needed, but we also need to update our roadmaps and increase ambition where possible.
Very good. Got some actionable items from there as well. I'd like to maybe wrap it up that we do have the sense of, the system is too large to cope and to handle. But that's why, as Gökçe mentioned, as Janne mentioned, the public-private partnership is key. From the public-private partnership, there's no parties that could be left out. You must also think about, very, very early-stage startups that could provide you the data, the input on what is needed by the new innovations. Either it's very research-based, so-called deep tech innovations, or, randomly, maybe more ICT-based solutions. But yeah, the fact is that we're all in this together. Either we put our heads together to get ahead, or we don't do that. I'd like to thank Janne, Gökçe, and Dalar for being in this panel with us. And thank you for the audience as well. If you have any questions, then please do reach out via the platform or on site with the panelists to have your questions directly to them. I thank you and have a nice evening.